When I played Elden Ring for the first time, I remember thinking, this is it. This is the end of video games. It felt like the culmination of all of FromSoftware's idiosyncrasies and talents presented on the grandest imaginable scale. Over the course of a decade, they had altered the landscape of AAA games and indie games and synthesized a new genre. These are games that excel on the merits of their design, and a lot has been said about FromSoftware's strengths. Engaging combat systems, subtle world building, thematic depth, innovative multiplayer elements, puzzle box level design, memorable boss fights, and infinite replayability. But there is one magic weapon in FromSoftware's design arsenal whose praises have gone woefully unsung. Cloth.
Cloth. Cloth. Oh, cloth.
There is nobody out there doing cloth like FromSoftware, and it's not just for decoration. Within the unique design paradigm FromSoftware has established, what a character is wearing is very important. It's right up there with vague item descriptions, magical maidens, and guys who go, oh. When I'm examining FromSoftware's approach to cloth and costume design, I look at make, material, and movement. Make is the cut of the cloth, the shape and how it accentuates, complements, or conceals the form of the body underneath. This is Simone, and this is a bedsheet. Together, they will show you the power of make. Simply by altering the way the sheet hangs off the body, Simone can become any number of characters. The Maiden, the Old Hag, the High Priestess, the Ghost, the Ranger, and this thing. Make taps into established archetypes that create a broad impression very quickly. Material defines the quality, texture, condition, and color of the cloth to refine that impression and create more meaning. It can indicate factional alliance, prestige, status, and well-being, or lack thereof. Movement is how the cloth reacts to the body beneath, how it flows or billows or hangs. In the real world, a garment's particular style of movement would be defined by its make and material, but video games aren't bound to boring reality. By combining and tweaking these elements, you can create worlds of meaning, and even the broadest archetypes can have layers of nuance. The Grafted Scion is the first enemy you meet in Elden Ring, and appropriately, it demonstrates how even the most simply made costume can enhance a character. The costume in question is effectively a big-ass tarp, draped over a twisted mass of flesh and limbs. Grafting is the nasty process by which the elites of Godric's kingdom gain strength. They harvest body parts from their loyal subjects and bond them to their own. You aren't given this context before you run into the Scion, but looking at it, you kinda get it. Without the shawl, it's a hideous, deformed, shrieking monster. But simply by covering it with a well-made veil, it becomes something else. Suddenly, it raises questions. Did it dress itself? Does it have a sense of shame or even modesty? Or did a loved one dress it with care, vainly hoping that the person they knew is still alive, somewhere in the monster? Good job, FromSoftware. You put a bedsheet on a flesh spider and you made me sad. Most of the outfits in Elden Ring are more complex than the big tarp. You'll recognize a lot of tried and true medieval fantasy costuming archetypes. Hooded cutthroats, wandering nobles with their traveling cloaks, feral men in skin loincloths, wizards in flowing robes, and lots of knights in armor and tabards. And I mean a lot. But even within this one make, there's nearly unlimited storytelling potential, thanks to the magic of material. It's hard to say whether the world of Elden Ring is mid-apocalypse, post-apocalypse, or post-post-apocalypse. The important thing is, before everything went to shit, the world was full of powerful lords with schemes and dreams, and they sent their forces out into the lands between to work towards their ends. The story of Elden Ring is this complex web of alliances, grudges, and ideological disputes between those surviving factions. And the game is not big on exposition. For the most part, what you know is what you've seen. So costuming is a major element to storytelling. Within the reality of a medieval fantasy war, color-coded uniforms helpfully instruct knights who they're supposed to stab. But for the player, the color of cloth is a visual guide to understanding the motivations and meaning behind each conflict.
Well, to me, it's super important. Actually, on every show, I always start with a color palette.
This is Carlos Rosario, costume designer on Shogun.
Because that's really, like I said before, I think that really is the first sort of like the first piece of the puzzle that allows you to sort of understand where this is all going.
Similar to Elden Ring, the show drops the viewer in the midst of a complex factional conflict that started long before the protagonist arrived. Costuming, specifically the color of materials, is the key to helping the viewer follow along. To this end, Carlos and his team spent months sourcing materials and dyes, and even over-dyed costumes to make sure they read clearly on camera.
That was really the beginning of everything, and the way I sort of delegated specific color palettes to each one of the lords.
Each of Elden Ring's lords has their own team color as well. And while it helps create a clear distinction between factions, it can also be used as a shorthand to quickly understand the vibe of each faction. Radahn is Team Red. He embodies raw power and aggression. His castle is red, his hair is red, his troops scour the blighted red land of Caelid in red tabards. Rennala is a magical academic, cold and distant as the moon. She's Team Blue. The knights in her territory wear cool blue tones that mirror the blues of their flooded fields, the glintstone that powers their magic, and the moonlight beams they use as weapons. Marika is the greatest lord in the lands between. She's obsessed with purity and power. So it's not surprising that when it was time to pick out her little color scheme, she said,
"I love gold."
For the most part, her Golden Order knights defend the capital, but when you spot them out in the field, their goldenness makes them a simple and effective bit of storytelling. When you come across a squad of them on a muddy battlefield or in a damp old cave, you immediately know that the Golden Queen had some business there and sent her golden cops to do her dirty work. All that just from the color of some tabards. And you can squeeze even more meaning into the texture of those materials. In Shogun, Yabushige's first appearance makes a big impression. Up until then, we'd only seen hemp robes and whatever rags British people wear. Then this guy shows up in a coat made of raven feathers. He's built different. He's built cool.
So I wanted these characters to be really much more in touch with nature. And by doing research, I've seen a lot of jimbaris and pieces that were made out of feathers. And I thought, well, this guy for me is more like a rock and roll star. Why don't we just create a jimbari with raven feathers, right? And so I thought that was really appropriate for the character. And it shows you the importance of costume design, because it really kind of like amplifies the essence and the energy of who the character is by just creating such a specific piece like that one.
Yabushige is meant to be kind of weird, kind of a relic of the old world, kind of a beast. And giving his outfit this evocative texture sells it. Elden Ring uses the same tricks. Radahn's armor is lined with fur accents, the type fantasy fans have come to associate with barbarians and wildmen. And Mohg, well...
Dearest Mikola.
Yeah, this guy is his whole vibe is so ostentatious. It's just great.
That's my friend Faith Schaefer, a visual development artist who works in animation, illustration, and comics.
Like, I love the drama of when he was kissing that guy's hand, there was a close-up of the fabric on his shoulder, and it's very, quite literally, in my opinion, like theatrical. Look, it's just like your classic red curtain with gold fringe.
Mohg is, in fact, a messy boy who loves drama, and that velvety curtain texture emphasizes it. He's the shunned child of the royal lineage, but instead of accepting a life in the sewers, he's convinced himself that he's going to create his own dynasty. That plan somehow involves dressing like an absolute pimp and kidnapping his stepbrother. But really, he has one of the most baroque outfits in the game, which reads as extreme compensation for the royal treatment he was denied. He's putting on a show. And the expressive power of cloth gets even more powerful when it's used to contrast non-cloth materials like armor.
The contrast between materials is always, that just sort of scratches a good part of your brain, right? Armor especially like accentuates our natural shapes that we have. It just sort of like takes them and like stretches them and squashes them in ways that are like really fun to look at. And then contrasting that with like a soft material, it takes it over the top. It's really good.
Contrast between materials says a lot. Radahn's barbaric fur accents are tucked into baroque brass armor, a marriage of primal violence and royal blood. In the second phase of your fight with Malakath, his coarse, ascetic monk robes burn away to reveal the intimidating ebony armor underneath. Suddenly, this guy you thought of as a ranting beast has poise and purpose. Material tells stories. The first time I played Dark Souls, my gamer eyes zeroed in on a few things I wasn't used to seeing in other games. First and least importantly, you could kick the enemy ragdolls around like big soccer balls. But also, there was a surprising amount of dynamic cloth. By that I mean bits of the enemy costuming that seemed to move procedurally, based on an in-game physics engine rather than preset animations. In Dark Souls 2, they cranked it up further, adding lots of physically modeled skirts, sashes, and cloaks. Then Bloodborne came along and said, what if we added more cloth physics? And what if cloth was hair? With each new game, they got bolder, and by the time they were onto Elden Ring, they were applying cloth physics with expert abandon. But why?
Well, the cloth matters, like I said, because it helps so much with secondary motion.
This is Gwen Frey, who worked as an animator on BioShock Infinite and now runs her own studio. That secondary motion she's talking about is any animation that happens as a result of, but not necessarily in time with the primary motion. Like when I make my guy run forward and then stop, one layer of animation is ended, but my cloak keeps jostling for a few seconds after.
If there's a thing that's dangling on your character, like a necklace or a cool piece of chain, as much as possible you want that animation for that in engine, because having that kind of overlapping motion when a character moves or stops, it just adds a lot, right?
This overlapping motion is based on the way stuff moves in real life, but it can also cover up rough transitions and character animations. It makes everything feel more cohesive and alive. The reason we don't see it more is that it's fucking hard to do. There are lots of ways to simulate cloth, and even more ways for it to go wrong.
The arm is capable of going through the cloth sim wide by changing the bone animations. Happened like a tick before the cloth, and now the cloth is stuck in a print. Like how few vertices can you get away with simulating? How much can you get away with optimizing it before it? Most of working with cloth is figuring out which corners you can cut before the cloth breaks.
Most of the characters in Elden Ring wear clothes made out of normal cloth, and it moves like normal cloth. Renala's silky academic robes move silkily. Radahn's thick cloak looks like it could double as a grand tapestry, and only the biggest gusts of wind can get it moving. It takes a tremendous amount of effort just to reach the point where stuff looks fine. But FromSoftware goes even further and turns physics itself into a tool of expression. Look at these guys. At first glance, they look like a couple of priests or cultists. Just a big guy and a skinny guy in monkish hooded robes. But if you look a little closer, you might notice that the material is a little unsettling. A pallid, milky hue with a clammy sheen. And then you might notice the movement. A little too elastic to be linen or cotton. It doesn't quite flow so much as flop and wobble. Kind of like flesh. Well, they're wearing flesh. Obviously, the make and material of the Godskin duo's costuming do a lot to contribute to their queasy vibe. But they're also a great example of how good FromSoftware is at using uniquely tuned physics to create a distinct movement. If they had copied and pasted the same physics parameters they used for a velvet shawl or cotton cloak, it would still be distressing. But they went the extra mile and tuned the dangly bits of the robe to move with a distinct cartilaginous wobble. And they keep pushing themselves further. Malenia has multiple layers of cloth, a fluttering cape, silk robes, chainmail, and long hair. Horalu is trailed by a heroically billowing cloak and the flowing mane of a spectral lion. The Elden Beast Dancer boss in Shadow of the Erdtree might be the culmination of FromSoftware's cloth obsession. Not one, but 3 bodies hidden beneath silky sheets moving together as one. Its dizzying choreography is accentuated by trailing strands of beast hair, swinging armor plates, and bustling cloth. It is truly one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a game. So knowing how hard it is to make video game cloth behave, FromSoftware must have some sort of secret dark magic cloth tech that prevents embarrassing glitches, right? No, it definitely breaks. But what they have in their favor is a world-building philosophy that can withstand imperfection. FromSoftware has established a relationship of cooperation with their players. The tacit agreement is that if they show us magical, stunning things in a brilliantly realized fantasy world, we'll forgive them when their ambition makes stuff a little janky. They're less focused on rendering reality and more focused on feelings. And they're good at it. So when my guy's cloak clips through his ass for a second, I'm willing to let it slide. FromSoftware shows no signs of cooling on their cloth obsession. In Shadow of the Erdtree, we've got that lion dancer guy, and Messmer's bitchy red wrap, and this fancy hat, and this wolf fur cloak, and this gauzy canopy hanging over the whole entire world. And that's just the stuff we've seen in the trailers. So while you're running around appreciating the new poison swamps, legendary weapons, and boss fights, make sure you take a moment to appreciate the tassels, scarves, veils, and shawls. Because nobody does it better.